The para-elemental plane of ice, also known as Frostfell, is the plane that lies between the elemental planes of water and air. The cool breeze of the air freezes the water into a border region of solid ice. However, it is very dissimilar from those two planes, as it does not possess the fluidity of water or the loftiness of air. For the most part, the plane of ice is a solid mass of ice, although it does have the occasional fissures, caverns, chasms, and elemental pockets. Unlike most inner planes, the para-elemental plane of ice does have gravity, with the plane of water resting below, the plane of air above it, and the energy planes to either side. Because of this, there is a top or surface to the plane, where the chunk of ice ends, and a flat plane of ice and snow with an atmosphere of breathable air above it. This region, which borders the plane of air, is called the precipice. The whole region is buffeted by freezing cold winds, blanketed in thick snow, illuminated by a dim whitish-blue light, and dotted with ice-coated mountains. The majority of the plane lies below the precipice in its solid ice core. If you continue through the plane moving downwards towards the elemental plane of water, the ice slowly melts, forming a sea of icy sludge and scattered icebergs. Since the paraplane of ice rests on top of the plane of water, it forms a surfaceless ocean of suspended ice chunks called the Sea of Frozen Lives. Moving laterally towards the negative energy plane, you can go one of two directions. Either towards the quasi-elemental plane of salt, which lies between the negative energy plane and the plane of water, or towards the quasi-elemental plane of vacuum, the border between the negative energy plane and the plane of air. Near the quasi-elemental plane of salt, the ice gives way to acidic hail made from salt water in a region called the Stinging Storm. If you instead go towards the quasi-plane of vacuum, the ice and snow disappear, leaving only a pitch-dark void of absolute cold called the Frigid Void. Moving the other direction, towards the positive energy plane, the plane once again changes in one of two ways. Towards the quasi-plane of steam, which is the border between the positive energy plane and the plane of water, is the Fog of Unyielding Frost, a place of super cold mists that will freeze your lungs solid without some form of cold protection. Towards the other positive quasi-plane, the plane of lightning, which lies between air and the positive energy plane, the ice breaks up into a field of powdery snow which softly blows in the breeze. This place, called the Shimmering Drifts, is quite picturesque and seems pleasant to visit, but the snowflakes are charged with energy that wreaks havoc on one's mind, causing them to lose their wits. Each turn, or every 10 minutes, spent here, one must make a successful saving throw or suffer the effects of a confusion spell. So, the para-elemental planes do not exist in 3rd or 4th edition, and while they do exist in 5th edition, we only get about a paragraph or so of information about each one. So, 99% of the information in this video will be from 1st and 2nd edition. Travel. So how does one get to the paraplane of ice? Well, you have the normal means of plane traveling, such as a door and sigil, or spells such as gate or plane shift. If using plane shift, the material component is a tuning fork made of pewter and tuned to the note A. Of course, you can also enter a bordering plane and travel to the plane of ice from there. This method is considered the best way of entering the plane of ice. If using the ethereal plane, one must find and proceed through an ethereal curtain the color of aquamarine. Additionally, there are at least 4 permanent portals known to lead to the para-elemental plane of ice. One is in Cania, the 8th layer of the 9 Hells, one in Muspelheim, the 2nd layer of Isgard, although why a portal to ice exists on this fiery and volcanic realm is anyone's guess. There is a 2-way portal in Soulfreeze, the 566th layer of the Abyss, but the key required to use it is a mortal soul, which is destroyed in the process. I imagine if you don't know about this restriction, it would be very easy to walk through and then have your soul destroyed. And then the last known portal to the plane of ice is on another icy layer of the Abyss, but which one, we don't know. Another way of entering this plane is through elemental vortices. An elemental vortex is a portal that forms in high concentration of elements on the prime material plane, which then leads to the corresponding element's plane. Vortices to the paraplane of ice are rare and can be found within glacial or Arctic regions, usually at the heart of a particularly powerful blizzard or deep beneath frigid seas. Okay, now that we know how to get here, how do you travel within the plane? Well, on the precipice, the surface of the plane that borders the plane of air, you can walk normally and climb the ice mountains the way you would normal ones. On the rest of the plane, it's similar to the plane of Earth, in the sense that it's mostly all solid matter with few openings. One will need to either enter the ethereal, and then come back when they see an open space, use spells such as Stone Shape or Pass Wall that have been modified to work on ice, carve or mine a path through the ice, or any other method you can think of traveling through solid matter. However, the plane frequently shifts, buckles, and reforms, sometimes forming cracks, fissures, and chasms. These areas are very dangerous, as one misstep can cause an avalanche, and slipping is easy without proper ice climbing equipment, such as spiked boots or staves. Properties. Let's go over the physical properties of the plane. The most important, and probably the most obvious one, is freezing. As you've probably guessed, the plane of ice is extraordinarily cold. In fact, it's probably the coldest plane in the multiverse. Anyone without cold immunity or some form of magical protection from cold suffers 1d6 damage per round, which a round in AD&D was 1 minute. Using non-magical protection from cold, so wearing warm clothes, staying out of wind and water, etc., reduces this to 1d6 damage per turn, a turn being 10 minutes in AD&D, effectively reducing the damage taken by 90%, but you'll still take damage. Some spots of the plane are colder than others. These areas are so cold that no amount of non-magical protection helps prevent it, and they take twice as much damage from the environment. If you get really deep into the paraplane, it gets so cold that everything freezes. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Flesh freezes, blood freezes, stone, air, energy, light, spoken words, thoughts, anything else you can imagine, all freezes. You can't see, as the light is frozen and cannot move to meet your eyes, and speaking or thinking clearly requires a saving throw versus petrification to successfully do. Otherwise, those words or thoughts are frozen. Words, thoughts, or concepts frozen this way resemble strange ice crystals, and they hold no power or meaning. Sometimes creatures take these out of the plane in magically sealed containers to sell on the planar bazaars. If you travel even deeper into the plane, even ice itself freezes. It's so cold that even creatures immune to cold take 1d6 cold damage per round, and new ice is constantly forming at a rate of 1 foot per minute, making the ground unstable as it is constantly growing. Breathing. On the precipice, the surface of the plane that borders the plane of air, there is breathable air. However, the rest of the plane is solid ice and doesn't have any air, so one needs a way of getting around this. Now, the various fissures, cracks, chasms, caves, etc. within the plane often have a thin atmosphere, as air does leak out of the nearby ice, but it only has a 75% chance of being thick enough to sustain life. Vision. The plane is mostly solid matter, so without a ring of X-ray vision or something similar, you won't be able to see well, if at all. In first edition, the ice is usually translucent enough to see around 10 to 20 yards. Now, sometimes you might find yourself in some sort of cave opening where you can see normally. However, the plane of ice has no light, so you'll need infravision or a light source. However, torches, lanterns, and other flames have a few problems. First, they only work in areas where the air is thick enough to breathe, as fire obviously needs air. Additionally, it melts snow and ice, and given the instability of the plane, even a small amount of melting can shift the matter around you and incite either an icefall or douse you in freezing cold water. In the really cold regions deep in the plane, even fire freezes. When this happens, there's a 50% chance it freezes into a solid, fire-shaped chunk of ice, and a 50% chance it becomes black fire, a black flame that radiates powerful cold instead of heat, and provides little to no light. The last physical property is pressure. Just like the plane of Earth, the ice here attempts to regenerate to fill in any holes, applying significant pressure on anyone stuck there. Anyone entombed within solid ice takes 1d2 damage per turn, which is 10 minutes, and constructed passages seal within 1d6 days. Although open areas are more common here than on the plane of Earth. Okay, now let's talk about the magical properties. Since the plane is mostly solid matter, you do have some physical restrictions that can affect spellcasting. Mainly, if you don't have enough room to move your arms, you can't perform the somatic components, and if you don't have air to breathe, the vocal components may be impossible to make. Spells that require line of sight are only as applicable as the ice is translucent. Spells that create stuff, such as create water or wall of iron, fill in any small gaps within the solid ice. Fire spells work, but long-lasting ones will melt the ice, which will in turn extinguish the flames. Fire and earth magic is diminished, meaning they function as if the caster was one level lower, and spells higher than 4th level are impossible. While water magic is enhanced, meaning it functions as if the caster was one level higher, and saving throws against them are made at -1. Like all inner planes, conjuration magic can only summon creatures from the plane you're on, or a bordering plane. So, for the para-elemental plane of ice, you could summon a creature from the plane of ice, the elemental planes of water and air, the quasi-elemental planes of salt, steam, vacuum, and lightning, and the ethereal plane. Spell keys that allow one to overcome the diminishing effects of fire and earth magic take the form of physical objects cut from fine glass or crystal. They must be designed for the spell and the individual using it, so no two spell keys are alike. Okay, I'm going to interrupt real quick here, but if you guys are enjoying the video, you should give it a like, subscribe to the channel, or leave a comment. I love having conversations about D&D, and I do read all the comments, so please comment something you like, something you hated, something going on in your campaign, just anything. Okay, now back to the plane of ice. Encounters. Okay, so what kind of environmental hazards can you expect to find on the paraplane of ice? The first up are elemental pockets. These are pockets of other elements that have found their way into this plane. Pockets of water are underground icy lakes, pockets of air resemble ice caverns, etc. Cold spots and true cold. So the entire plane is obviously extremely cold, and some spots are colder than others. I already talked about this in the physical property section, so I'm not going to go into detail, but essentially, cold spots are places so cold that non-magical protection, such as heavy winter clothing, are useless, and areas of true cold are the areas where everything freezes, including spoken words, thoughts, light, and even ice itself. Avalanches. Any sudden and loud noise can trigger an avalanche, requiring a save versus breath weapon and taking 46 damage on a success or half on a failure. Sinkholes. Occasionally, an area of ice will thaw just enough to become a freezing cold slush, but still solid enough to look like regular ice. Upon stepping on it, a victim will plunge into the icy water, most often freezing to death or drowning as the edges of the sinkhole are wet ice, making climbing out extremely difficult. Those wearing heavy winter clothing or with a lot of gear in their pack are even less likely to survive as it weighs them down. Inhabitants. Okay, so first let's talk about the natives, and the first of those are the ice para-elementals. So just how the 4 major elemental planes of fire, earth, water, and air have elementals, or sometimes called true elementals, the paraplanes have para-elementals. The ice para-elementals resemble ice sculptures of humanoids, but they sometimes take the shape of other prime material creatures. Many follow Cryonax, the prince of evil ice creatures, usually out of fear instead of loyalty, but others escape his domination by hiding in caves, in the precipice, or deep within the frozen core of the plane. These para-elementals live in conclaves or kingdoms ruled by a stronger ice para-elemental, usually a lord or noble, who gains their position through strength and respect. However, most of the race don't actually follow great leaders, but instead wander the plane in small, leaderless groups patrolling for intruders or hunting for food. Their food, so to speak, is warmth, slowly draining heat from whatever its source is. They don't actually consume the warmth, they simply sustain themselves on the act of converting warmth to cold, but they won't starve to death if they can't do this. Ice para-elementals give off a freezing cold aura that deals 1d4 damage within 10 feet of it each round. Its touch freezes water, freezing up to 100 square feet 6 inches deep. While in contact with snow, ice, sleet, or other cold environments, they heal 1d8 per round, which obviously makes them difficult to fight on their home plane. They're immune to cold-based magic, obviously, and they require magic weapons of +1 or greater to harm, just like all para-elementals. Next up we have Imiths. So Imiths are 8-foot tall humanoids with sweeping tails and are beautiful translucent beings made of ice crystals and encrusted with gem-like nuggets of ice. They have sharp talons on their hands and beards made of frost, the length of these beards signaling their age. They live in isolated communities in order to resist Cryonax's influence and are neutral in alignment like most elemental beings. They eat living creatures, sustaining themselves off their life essence more than the meat itself, but they still eat the meat. When words and thoughts are frozen by the plane, they know where they go. They collect and tap into their inherent power, adorning their bodies with the crystals which make up the gem-like ice nuggets you see attached to their bodies. Imiths can cause one of these frozen words on their body to shatter, releasing the word and a spell-like effect by tapping into its primal power. These spells usually take the form of spells that inflict pain or misfortune, such as Fumble, Hold Person, or Magic Missile, that give it useful abilities such as Fly, Haste, Pass Wall, or Teleport, or that just have an icy nature, such as Cone of Cold, Ice Storm, or Wall of Ice. And they can also alter other spells to be of an ice-based variant, such as turning stone shape to ice shape. Their sharp tail excretes a brown, syrupy poison that collapses the victim and gives them a -2 to all actions, and they take 1d3 damage every hour. 1d100 minutes later, the second stage of the affliction begins, causing them to babble incoherently whatever words come to their mind. Each time they speak a word, it is purged from their memory, and they can never speak that word again. This continues until they've lost the ability to speak every word in their vocabulary, and after 24 hours, the poison kills them. They are obviously immune to cold damage and are also resistant to slashing damage due to their hard, crystal-like nature. Frost Salamanders. Frost Salamanders are 6-legged reptiles with blue or white scales. They have blue eyes and translucent teeth that resemble icicles. They are creatures of primality and low intelligence, attacking creatures with only their natural claws with no plan except killing them as fast as possible. They drag the corpses of those they kill to icy pools of water, as they dislike eating warm flesh. They despise warmth, and they take 1 damage every 10 minutes spent in temperatures above freezing. Their layers are freezing cold, and any valuables found within them might take hours to thaw. Potions are almost always ruined by this freezing. They emit a cold aura that deals 1d8 damage to all creatures within 20 feet of it, and take extra damage from fire. Ice Crabs. These look like, you guessed it, crabs made of ice. However, they have 2 claws and only 4 legs. If remaining still, they blend in with their surroundings, assuming they're in an area of ice, obviously. They are often found with frost salamanders, and they collect diamonds and pearls as treasure. And the last native of the plane are ice mephits. These are mephits made of ice. Of course. Out of all the mephits, these are the cruelest, reveling in torture and wanton destruction. Now let's move to the animals of the plane. You will obviously find ice animentals here, animentals just being creatures that resemble animals but made out of ice. However, there are actually many prime material animals accustomed to Arctic environments that can be found here, such as polar bears and penguins. You can also find cold acclimated insects burrowing in the ice, such as the frostbite, which feeds on any heat it can find, oftentimes warm-blooded creatures from other planes. Monsters. Most monsters acclimated for Arctic regions can be found here, including rimmerhas, ice toads, frost giants, yetis, and white dragons. The various monsters of the plane wage constant wars against each other to prove their strength and ensure their survival. Now let's move on to the major players of the plane. What big names are found here? Well, the biggest, most notable name on the plane of ice is Cryonax, the Prince of Para-Elemental Ice. He resembles a 15-foot furry humanoid, looking similar to a yeti, but with 2 long tentacles instead of arms, making him look sort of like an icy, one-headed demogorgon. He is the only para-elemental to become strong enough to be labeled an archomental. He also claims to be the son of an elder elemental god, and both of these facts inflate his ego to the point he considers himself a deity. His palace is said to tap the forces of the negative energy plane for some unknown purpose. Cryonax wishes to bring the entire paraplane of ice under his rule, then to increase the power of ice to the point it is no longer a para-elemental plane, but a full-fledged elemental plane. No one is sure how he'd do this or if it's even possible, but one theory suggests he could freeze the entirety of the plane of water or air, thus making it an extension of the plane of ice, or at the very least turning them into border planes of snow and slush. He also wishes to become more powerful than the other archomentals, which he believes will elevate ice to the one true element, and all other elements will be seen as lesser matter. He hopes to see the entire multiverse frozen one day. Next up is Albranthannalar, a powerful white dragon and high-level wizard, who uses enchantment and conjuration magic to acquire more allies in a bid to destroy Cryonax and claim the plane as her own. For now, however, Albranthannalar and Cryonax are not in open conflict and just use spies to sabotage the other's plans. Some believe, primarily the Kuo-toa believe this, that an ancient race existed in the multiverse before any other species existed, and eventually cut contact with the cosmos and sealed themselves within the paraplane of ice. These are called the Sleeping Ones. Assuming the stories are even true, seeing their frozen bodies is supposed to inspire a sort of brain-shattering awe, robbing the viewer of sensibilities, and they are said to be up to several miles long. Locations. The first location is Arcolantha, a several-mile diameter pocket of elemental air, far beneath the surface of the plane. The walls of this cavern are polished smooth from the air, and in the center is a glowing white orb, illuminating the entire pocket. Animals of all kinds from across the multiverse are frozen in the walls, turning this into a sort of zoo/museum. If thawed out, the animals are alive and well. The Chiseled Estate. This is the realm of Cryonax, the archomental of evil ice creatures. The Chiseled Estate is a colossal fortress of ice, rising over a mile above the surface of the plane and 4 times as deep beneath the surface. Rumors say he enslaves wizards and priests, mostly ice and water genasi, to produce cold-themed monsters for his armies, such as snow ropers, frost umber hulks, and razor-winged birds made of ice. The Chiseled Estate is even colder than most of the paraplane, dealing an extra 1d6 damage per round. The Mountain of Ultimate Winter. This is a mountain of pure ice crystals that sits next to the other ice mountains atop the precipice. It is the coldest place on the entire paraplane of ice, which means it's probably the coldest place in the multiverse. Non-natives must make a save versus spell or freeze solid in 1d4 rounds. Non-natives that are immune to cold still suffer 1d6 damage per round. It is also considered an area of true cold, which I described earlier in the physical property section, but it means that it freezes everything from words to concepts. The Imiths and ice para-elementals that come here like to capture explorers and freeze them solid, putting them on display in the Caves of Folly. Somewhere near the Mountain of Ultimate Winter is a secret place where Imiths tend to gather. The Imiths scour the mountain for useful frozen words and ideas to keep and adorn their bodies with. It has the same properties as the Mountain of Ultimate Winter, meaning that everything freezes, non-natives freeze solid in 1d4 rounds, etc. Bloodmire. This is a frozen lake of blood and weapons created from a bloody battle between the Frost Trolls, Ice Trolls, and Frost Giants living on the plane. Many of the combatants froze during the battle, creating a scene of utter horror and grisly beauty. It lies in a region of the plane called Itharior. And the last location on the para-elemental plane of ice is Tierra Minute, a city surrounded by a magical bubble built by priests of a forgotten wind goddess on the plane of air. It's somehow wound up on the paraplane of ice, and it floats above the precipice. Temperature-wise, it's still cold, but nowhere near as cold as the rest of the plane, so it acts as a rest stop and trading post for travelers. It is ruled by a council of 9 people who will welcome all seeking shelter. It has portals to other planes and many merchants who will hire adventurers to find frozen ideas or a valuable substance called Eternal Ice. Eternal Ice is ice that never melts, making it very useful for storing food and drinks. And that is everything I could find on the para-elemental plane of ice. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and remember to subscribe for more D&D related content.